All right, everybody, welcome to the webinar, Creating a Simple VR Experience Using Unity. I'm Marcelo Lewin, the host, also the DELLiVR Program Manager and the guy behind HowToCreateVR.com. And then your instructor is going to be Tiffany Raber. She's an awesome Unity developer, and we'll learn more about her. So welcome to everybody that's online. I appreciate you joining us. We're happy to have you here. So before we get started, I'm just going to give you a quick overview of the DELLiVR Conference, which is going to be happening in LA this June, and then followed by London and Singapore in the fall. But the DELLiVR Conference is, and especially for everybody here, it's the one to attend, and not just because I'm the program manager of it, but really it's the one to attend if you want technical, hands-on, how to do stuff in VR. This isn't a, I mean, we're going to have presentations that are more bigger picture, and you can take those if you want. But if you want hands-on, you want to like literally get into the weeds of creating VR, it's designed for those of you that are very interested in virtual reality and getting into it, but really don't know how to create it yet. And so we're going to have a creator track and we have a management track. On the creator track, we'll have lots of sessions for those of you interested in doing more Unity-based hardcore VR development. And for those of you that are interested in 360, 180 VR video, we'll have tons of sessions on that. So you'll be able to go back and forth on the sessions you want to pick. It's 3 days. We're going to have 24 sessions, 2-day hands-on workshops. Also, Tiffany, which is the presenter today, will be teaching, I believe it's a 4-hour course on Unity. So she's going to get more in depth. And then we'll have a 2-day hands-on on Unity as well, which will really cover everything on it. So we're going to have a great keynote by Gary Radburn. He's the director of VR and AR for Dell. So definitely put this down on your calendar because, I mean, this is the event to really attend. I'm just excited and I hope to see everybody down there. You're going to have many packages. If you look at the price, honestly, and not because I'm part of this event, but I really, $795 for a full 3-day event is pretty amazing for the amount of classes and sessions we're going to give you. If you go to the DELLiVRconference.com, which is at the bottom right, and click on program, you'll see everything that we're going to be teaching you. And it's going to include not just Unity, but it's going to include web VR. It's going to include like Amazon Sumerian. It's going to be 360 video. There's going to be tons of things. If you do end up purchasing, remember to use the code HowToCreateVR to save $50. So on the 3-day pass and hands-on workshop. So definitely don't forget how to create VR, and I'll remind you. All right, so I'm Marcelo Lewin. I'm the program manager of the DELLiVR Conference, focused on the technical side or the creator side. Also, I'm the guy behind HowToCreateVR.com, which is my website where you can discover tons of different technologies and tools around VR and then learn them all for free. Just go to HowToCreateVR.com and you can register for a free account there. Your instructor is Tiffany Raber, and instead of me talking about Tiffany, why don't you jump in and what is a biomedical visualization specialist?
Yeah, a question I get quite a bit. So my road to Unity development has been pretty much anything but standard, but I think mostly a lot of game developers and Unity developers have very interesting stories. So I actually have a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Drawing and Illustration and a Bachelor of Science in Biology. So I double majored at Ball State University, which is in Indiana, and I swear I knew what I was doing with that. Most people said, why are you on two opposite sides of the spectrum? And the reason was because I had the goal of becoming traditionally termed as a medical illustrator. And to become a certified medical illustrator, you need to attend one of the 4 accredited programs in the world. So I then pursued my master's in biomedical visualization at the University of Illinois at Chicago. So like I said, traditionally termed medical illustrators, which is a little easier to comprehend, any visualization that has to do with science, anatomy, chemistry, your textbooks, so any illustrations, your interactive e-learning, your surgical training, all of that is considered what medical illustrators do. So we're trained to take like really complex concepts and translate them for a specific audience.
So was VR part of that certificate or that degree that you took, or is that something you had to learn later and they're now trying to catch up with VR?
Yeah, it actually wasn't. Surprisingly, medical illustrators are very traditional in their techniques still. And when I was at the University of Illinois at Chicago, they decided to introduce a Unity class, and specifically for medical illustrators. And what that means is we're not just focused on gaming and game mechanics, but focused on learning and wireframing for a learner in the best way, and creating like gamification tools to help learners comprehend and learn in a more interactive fashion. So then from there, I took my Unity development skills, started to play with VR, because when I saw like anatomy in VR, I was like, wow, this is the only medium that has really translated spatial awareness within the body. And I was hooked on it, and I decided that if VR or even AR fits, I'm going to try to implement something within healthcare or anatomy into that media.
Well, and I think you got in at the right time as well with
Yeah.
VR. Yeah, definitely. Very cool. All righty. Well, I'm glad you're here with us. And I know you also did a tutorial for HowToCreateVR.com, so you can check out, we'll have a couple of tutorials there as well. Also, if you have any questions, please feel free. If you have any questions about this webinar, or anything else, feel free to send me an email, marcelo@howtocreatevr.com. If you have any specific questions about the DELLiVR Conference, feel free to send an email to Stephanie. She's the event manager. And there is the email for Stephanie as well. So Tiffany, with that said, remember, good luck. We're all counting on you.
Well, great. So the first thing I'd like to go over is the Unity project. Since most of the listeners right now do not have a lot of experience in Unity, I just want to go over the structure and how I'll be working in Unity. So first, I'd like to go into the project window, which is down at the bottom. And you can see right here, I have a folder of assets. And I'll actually kind of navigate around the scene to show you what some of these assets are. So I've created just a standard bedroom with a small office area over here where we'll do most of our interacting. And this space is within a forest skybox, which is kind of Unity's example of a background in three-dimensional space. And all of these assets, some of them I got off the Unity Asset Store, and others I just simply made myself. I am a 3D artist at heart, so it sometimes is just easier for me to make the models in a 3D software program. So where you can find these assets is in the project window in the assets folder. A Unity project is basically just a bunch of folders combined into one, and it's packaged in a folder system. So under the folder external is where you'll be able to find some of the assets for the bedroom. And most of these will be under prefabs or models. And then I have a materials folder, a models folder, the Oculus folder, which we'll touch on that in a little bit, prefabs, resources, scenes, scripts, textures. This is just standard best practices for setting up a Unity folder, because imagine if you're playing a game or you're making a game, and think of a game you've played and think of how many assets are really in that game. And a Unity asset is just anything that is visualized in the scene view, and not always visualized, but sometimes empty or invisible assets as well. But if you think of how many trees, let's just say a tree, and swords and I don't know, armor, we'll say all of that's assets. There could be thousands and thousands in a game. So you want to keep a good folder structure so you can find those assets immediately and access them when you're manipulating them. So primarily what we'll be working in is the scenes folder. And the way I broke up this tutorial is that each scene is somewhat like a progression marker in the tutorial. So we'll start with 0, and then we'll go into scene 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 as we make it down through the tutorial. I'll be skipping into those scenes just because I don't want to make everybody wait while I'm, importing assets or something like that. But those are really good markers for you when you're referencing back to this project. Okay, and the last thing I want to do is I want to explain the hierarchy of this scene. So the hierarchy is right over here. And what the hierarchy is a list of your assets that are in your scene view. So everything in this scene right now is within the hierarchy. I have a game object right here that's called bedroom static. These are just, you can think of them as like your decor assets. So we're not going to be working with them at all. They're just in the scene. Then I have something called desk objects. There's nothing there now. It's just an empty game object, but I will be importing assets into that game object, and then we'll be working with those assets. I also have another folder called lights. We won't be working with those today. And then camera, which we will be replacing with the Ovr Camera Rig. So again, let's go ahead and start in scene 0. And the first thing I want to do is go ahead and populate my desk. So I will just show a quick example of this, and then I'll probably move on to the starter scene. So the way I'm going to populate my desk is just by importing some assets. I've went ahead and in the prefabs folder, put all the assets that you would probably be using to interact with right here. So I can go ahead and pull in a cube. And you can see that this cube, I actually was playing with it at the beginning. It's now like a diagonal, weird, kind of like awkwardly placed cube. So what I can do is go into my prefab and open the prefab asset. And then I'm just going to go ahead and take its rotation off and its transform component. And then also size it back down to 1 in its X, Y, and Z axis. So then if I go ahead and save that and go back, I'm going to take off again the rotation component, and then I should be back to normal. So I'm just going to start placing cubes down onto this scene. So I have a few that I've made for you. And these are just simply examples for interacting. I also have some little dice game objects, and all they are primitive cubes with a texture on them. And you can see that they're all adding into the hierarchy. So if I take what I have right now and I select all of them, and the way I select all of them is by selecting one, hitting shift, I want to make them children of my parent game object, which is called desk objects. Again, this is just best practices. You should be keeping your game objects and all of your assets in a way that makes sense to you. So then I just drag them into the empty game object called desk objects. So I can expose them when I want to, and I can keep all of them in a good order. And if you want to just move one object, I'm just left clicking and then moving it back out one at a time. But if I want to click both objects, then I'm clicking, left clicking, shift, and then left clicking again. I just saw that question quickly in the Q&A. Okay, so then I'm going to go ahead and let's add a book. And I'm actually going to add a few books. And the way I'm going to do this is just by duplicating my game object. So I'm going to simply have my game object selected, and I know it's selected because it has the transform gizmo on it. And I'm going to press Control D. What that does is it duplicates the book for me, and you won't actually see it in your scene because it's in the exact same spot and it's duplicated. But if I bring it up, I can see that I have two books. I'm going to rotate this slightly so it looks like it's just kind of sitting organically. And I could even make this look like a different book if I wanted to make it smaller and maybe squeeze it in its Z-axis. So now it just looks like a smaller book. I'll also go ahead and add maybe a little globe over here. I don't know, maybe that's like a bouncy ball. I just wanted something round that we can interact with. And the glass. So now I have a bunch of objects on my desk that I can interact with. Let me clean this up quickly by putting these in the desk objects. And another way I can add something as well is, say I wanted another glass, I could actually just drag it directly into the hierarchy, and then it would show up in my scene and I can move it. Okay, the other thing we want to do for a setup in this scene is we want to go ahead and import our OVR camera. So we want to be able to, as soon as possible, when I put on the headset and press play in my Unity scene, I want to be able to look around in the space. And the way we do that is actually really simple. And before Oculus came out in 2016 with the SDK, or the software development kit, this wasn't possible, and people had to create their own scripts for head movement and rotation, translation, so they've made it really easy for us. Right now you can see that I have a camera. There's a camera preview in my scene view right here. I've also decided to have a double window for my scene view and my game view. My game view I can't interact in, but it will give me the proper positioning and representation of what I'd see in my game. So the way I'm going to access my OVR Camera Rig is by going down into my project window again. But I do want to mention that when you start your own Unity project, the OVR Camera Rig won't just be in your project. You actually have to download it from an external source. You can download it by going to Asset Store, Oculus Integration, and search. So for you, those of you that don't know what the asset store is, sorry about that.
Tiffany, real quick, sorry to interrupt you, but it looks like, it sounds like your audio sometimes goes in and out softer and harder. So I don't know if you're moving away from the mic or if it's a Zoom thing, because sometimes this happens with Zoom.
Oh yeah, I haven't moved.
Okay, so it must be a Zoom thing or a connection with the internet. So because some people have been pointing that out, and I heard it myself too. But unfortunately, there's not much we can do. Everybody, that's you know, Zoom is Zoom, and we can't control that. So sorry to interrupt you. So you can continue.
No, that's fine. If there's something that like specifically is not understood because I'm going in and out, please let me know immediately so I can repeat it.
Sounds good. Will do. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, no problem. So you can get the Oculus integration by just simply clicking here. And the Oculus Store has a weird UI setup, so you may have to like expand the window. And then what it'll usually say is download first, and you'll have to download the package, and then it'll prompt you then to import. And when you import, so say I click it, it's going to decompress, and it would probably take a while. And then it will come up with a little import window. And it'll ask me what I want to import. And hopefully I didn't just freeze everything. But until then, I'll go ahead and explain a little bit about the OVR SDK. Good, yay. Okay, I was hoping that nothing bad would happen. So I'm just gonna click OK. It tells me I have nothing to import because I simply have imported everything into my project already. But to return back to the OVR SDK, in my assets folder, after it's downloaded, I'll see a new folder called Oculus. So if I click in Oculus, I have a few other folders. It really is like a never-ending folder system. And what I'm worried about right now is VR. So I go to VR, and then I go to prefabs. And I'm going to see something called the OVR Camera Rig. We're going to navigate back to my scene. And what I'm going to do is just click on the OVR Camera Rig and drag it into my hierarchy. So now I have this camera, and it automatically positions itself at 0, 0, 0, but we're going to position it where our original camera was. And the way we do that is by going up to our original camera's transform component, copy component, go back to our OVR camera rig, and then in the same component, the transform component, I'm going to paste the component values, and it immediately translates the position, rotation, and scale of the old camera onto our OVR camera. So now if I expand my view, I'm looking exactly in the position that I want to be. Then the last thing we do is we just delete our old camera. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press my play button up here, and I'm going to go into the headset just so you can see that I'm in there and I'm looking around. When I do this, sometimes it makes a little bit of a scratchy noise. So what I'll do is I'll let you know I'm going into my headset. I'll mute, I'll unmute, or I'll press play and then unmute. So I'm going to go into my headset now. Okay, so I'm in my headset and I can see the things in front of me. I can look around in the room and it actually looks like I'm kind of sitting in a chair. There's an art piece. Okay, now I'm going to get out of my headset. Okay, great. Hopefully that wasn't too scratchy for everybody. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my assets and I'm going to skip to another scene. I'm going to skip to the starter scene. The only reason I'm skipping to the starter scene is because I have a better looking layout that I've already created beforehand. Next, I want to start adding physics components to my game objects. That way I can start to interact with them. This is the first step in doing so. So the first thing I'm going to do is select an object, and I'm just going to translate it in the y-axis up in the air. So in real life, I would expect for this cube to fall down. But if I hit play, and I'm not going to go into my headset, so just go ahead and look in the scene view. If I hit play, nothing happens. This cube is just floating in space. And I guess unless you were in space, this wouldn't be accurate at all. And even in space, you'd have some movement. So what I want to do is add a component to this game object called a rigid body. And a rigid body allows the game object to receive forces and torque that make our objects move in a realistic way. So the way I do that is by having my game object selected, add component, and I'm going to just type in rigid body. So if I type in rigid, you can already see that Unity brings up anything with rigid in it. And I want to make sure I'm clicking the rigid body and not the rigid body 2D since we're in 3D. So I just hit enter, and now my game object has this component called a rigid body on it. I want to point out, use gravity. So your rigid body can be influenced by gravity and act under gravitational forces if this is clicked on. So now that my cube has gravity on it, I will press play. And it has gravity, but it went all the way through my desk, my ground, and as you can see up here, in the y-axis, it is going to fall forever. So I want to stop that. And I want to figure out a way where my cube will fall, but when it hits the desk, it will actually hit as if it were falling onto a real desk. And the way I do that is by adding a collider. So just as I added the rigid body, I'm going to add a collider. So if I type collider in, you'll see that I get a lot of different types. And we want our colliders to best represent the shape of our actual game object. And a lot of people will even make colliders, like add them together to create other shapes. So we have a box collider, or we have a box or a cube. So we want a box collider. And again, make sure you're hitting just box collider, not box collider 2D. And now you can see like, oh my gosh, this box collider is huge. That's because the 3D software program that it was in, it just has like a size misrepresentation. So the way that I edit the collider is I go to Edit Collider, and then I see size. So I can edit collider in a couple different ways. In the size, I can bring it down, let's say like 0.6, and we'll say like 0.1. We'll see where that is. 0.1, 0.1. So now our collider is a little small. I can also edit the collider directly in the scene. If you look at these really tiny dots right here, I can pull out the box collider and get just a general representation of the shape. So for me, I mean, right now, that's okay. In the other scene, they'll be like perfect. So I'll uncheck Edit Collider, and let's hit play again and see what happens. Awesome. So now it actually falls on the desk. You can see because the collider is a little short of the edge, that the cube actually goes into the desk a little bit. So you do want to make sure that like your colliders are pretty representational of your game objects. Okay, and the other thing I want to bring up is in the box collider, there's something that says is trigger. We don't want to use this yet. If I were to click or check is trigger, then the physics component of this box collider would not work anymore. Triggers are colliders that are capable of executing scripts. When a collider touches another collider, that's a trigger. So right now we don't want to have the is trigger on. Okay, so I'm going to go over to just this globe real quick. And I'm going to quickly do the same thing. So I'll add a rigid body, make sure that gravity's on. I'm going to raise it up a little bit. And I also want to add a collider. But I want my globe to act like a globe when it falls. So a box collider wouldn't work. So now I want to make a sphere collider. And the sphere collider wraps perfectly around our mesh. And now if I hit play, you can see that it actually begins to roll, and it'll roll and continue to roll until it finds a place to stop. Keep in mind that all of the objects that it's intersecting with, they do have colliders on them.
And quick question, the reason it knows how to roll is because it's a sphere collider?
Yeah, since it's a sphere collider and it doesn't have those hard edges to stop it, it's just going to roll as like a normal ball or sphere would do in real life.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay, so now I'm actually going to go into my physics scene. So the only difference between the starter scene and the physics scene is that I have colliders on all of my interactable objects. I don't want to waste time doing the same thing. But really what you do for every interactable object, we just want to add rigid bodies and colliders.
And while you're doing that, I'm going to ask you a question here that came in. Is there a collider on the floor?
Yes, there is. So if there wasn't a collider, it would go directly through the floor. And you can see on the floor right now, there is a mesh collider here. And we don't go into mesh colliders in this webinar, but we do go into it during the workshop at DELLiVR. That's just a little more of a complex topic.
And we got to save some for that DELLiVR Conference. So
yeah, exactly.
Exactly. A little teaser there.
Yeah. Okay, so now we're going to go into so we have our physics scene. And if I press play, you can see that everything falls, everything is acting as it should. Even this cup right here has a capsule collider on it. So it's somewhat representational of that shape. But to interact with these objects, I want to set up my Oculus Avatar. So when you see the controllers that are represented as hands, that means that there's an avatar being set up within the Ovr Camera Rig. So let me condense this down so it just makes a little more sense to everybody. I'm going to condense the desk objects. And now I'm going to expand the player game object in the hierarchy. So I have this game object here, player, and that is my camera rig. And you can see as a child of the player, which is just an empty game object, I have something called the Ovr Camera Rig. I want to go ahead and open that up and then open its tracking space up. and I want to import the Oculus Avatar. And the way I do that is by going to Assets, back to my Oculus folder, but instead of VR, I want to go to Avatar. And then I go into Content, Prefabs. So again, a never-ending folder structure, but I promise it gets, it's pretty intuitive after you do it a couple of times. And then I want to import something called the local avatar. So I want to bring my local avatar as a child of player, but on the same level as my Ovr Camera Rig. So the local avatar, you can see that both the Ovr Camera Rig and the local avatar are children. Then what I want to do is expand my local avatar and locate the hand left and hand right. So by clicking, selecting both of these, I'm just left clicking Control and then clicking. For these, I also want to add a rigid body to both of these components because our hands are going to be interacting with the objects. So I just go back to Add Component, Rigid Body. This time though, I don't want to use gravity. So I'm going to check gravity off because I want to control the hands, not be like fighting with Unity's gravitational forces. The other thing is I want to click or check is kinematic. So if is kinematic is enabled, forces and collisions will not affect the rigid body anymore. So what that means is that the rigid body will be under full control, and these kinematic bodies affect the motions of other rigid bodies through collision. So my hands will not be affected if something like is colliding with my hands, but if my hands collide with, say, the cube or a book, then they will affect that cube or book. So I need to do the same thing on both. So for hand right, I type in rigid body, uncheck gravity, check is kinematic. And you can actually see, if you see the local avatar and hand left and hand right, they're up here in space. And that's just like a standard, when you bring in the avatar, they'll be up there, but they won't be that high when we hit play. The other thing I want to do so that the interactable items know that they need to interact with my hands is I want to add a collider. So I'm going to add a sphere collider to these. Doesn't really matter, but I think that sphere colliders are representational of the hands. I also want to change this radius to 0.05 because that's a huge radius for hands if I kept it at 0.5. So sphere collider, 0.05. Okay. So now I have these little representations of hands, which are my box or sphere colliders. And again, now I'm going to go back into my headset and I want to show you what happens. So I'm going to press play, mute, get in my headset, and pick up my controllers. Okay, let's see if I can find my controllers. Great. So I have hands. Let me fix my headphone. There we go. So you can see that my hands are being tracked pretty accurately to where my real hands are. And then also, if I were to run my hand into, say, this box, you can see that it is running into the box. You can also see, though, that if I go too fast, it actually won't really affect the box. And that's because Unity's graphics layer is, or its physics layer is actually slower than its graphics layer. So if I move too fast, it won't register. But that's another complex topic that we don't have to get into. And this is with, so you can see right here, it's a little bit going through, and that's because the collider is so small. So I'll fix that collider. But other objects, you can see that I'm running into them. But if I wanted to grab them, I simply can't because they're running into each other. And I can't just pick it up because I'm too busy pushing it away. Okay, so I'm going to get out of my headset. and I am back into Unity. So now we've successfully interacted with our game objects. And the last thing I want to do is I want to set up the objects so that they can actually pick up the game objects and grab and throw. So now what I'm going to do is go to my scenes again, and I'll go to my avatar interaction scene. And again, the reason I'm doing that is just so I can kind of start everything over. So I have my player, and it has, again, the Ovr Camera Rig, the local avatar. When I expand it, hand left and hand right both have rigid bodies and sphere colliders on them. A couple other things that these prefabs have on them are some standard Unity or Oculus scripts. We won't get into scripting now because that's, again, something for the workshop, and it's a 10-hour conversation. But just know that Oculus has hand-created scripts for you, so you don't have to do it. Okay, so the last thing I want to do is go ahead and add a script to both of my hands to allow me to pick up game objects. And the way I'll do that is by selecting hand left, going into my project folder, assets, scripts, and there's something called grab. So again, I want to select hand left. I'm going to drag this grab script over as a component. Now, the grab script has some parameters that we need to fill in. One is going to be the controller. So I do want to make sure that if I have my hand left selected, that I'm using the left touch controller. The other thing I want to put in is the grab button. So for this one, it just shows all of Oculus input. And I'll just go ahead and say the primary index trigger, but really you can pick whatever you want to be your trigger for grabbing. I'm going to do the exact same thing for hand right, but I'm going to make sure that my controller is the right touch or you'll have some issues. And I will also do primary index trigger again. Now, back to the hand sphere colliders. And if you remember what I said about isTrigger, isTrigger will allow a script to access the collider and then manipulate its movement from there. So if I press isTrigger, my hands will no longer run into the game objects, but they will be interacting determined by this grab script. So I went ahead and selected isTrigger for both of these by just selecting both and then clicking isTrigger, so I can double check and make sure. And this looks great. And I think that's all I have to do. If it's not, I'll get back out of the headset and we'll make a few changes. So I'm going to go into my headset again. Okay, I'm going to pick up my controllers. All right, and we're going to see if this works. And look at that. So I'm picking up objects with both my left and right hand. And these objects, if I throw them with gravitational forces, they will interact with other objects. So now my globe is somewhere where I could never access again. And then I could also like stack these objects on each other. And you can see that they're like wobbling because obviously the weight of the book or the shape of the book is larger than the cubes. And let's just take this cube and run it into that. And actually my, this vase thing is not, oh, I forgot I did this too. So here we go.
Quick question for you while you're back on the mic there. On the vase itself, and this may be for a more complex answer, so we don't have to go through this here, but on the vase, you basically, you put your hand on it and it picked it up, but is there a way where you have to like make it where it actually grabs it?
Yeah, so that's a really, I'm glad you brought that up, and we will talk about that in the workshop a little bit. Again, it's a really It's just adding an additional script. So what I like to do is, if you notice, when I was like picking up objects, the hands weren't representing how you would actually pick up an object in real life. And it also was like intersecting with the mesh, and it didn't look necessarily immersive. And the reason for that is because, one, I didn't have custom hand poses created. So I can make custom hand poses from the Oculus hands. They actually have a scene where you can go in and manipulate the fingers to shape around an object. And then I would import that hand pose. And then when I grab, I would make sure that hand pose is the one that's representative of what I'm grabbing. And then the other thing is, I like to snap my objects. So when I get close enough to an object I'm hoping to grab, I just have a snapping script. And it just snaps right into place of how I would expect to be holding it in real life. And that is for like high immersion and simulation. And I really like that practice.
Yeah, makes sense. Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No problem. And I know we're running out of time and we want to do some question and answer. So really, like, that's the basic mechanics of getting an interactive VR scene up and going. And if I were to go through this myself without, walking through every step, it may take me, 10 to 15 minutes, which is really fantastic, especially for a new Unity user. And then implementing the headset is, 2 minutes. So, thinking about this, Unity is not intimidating in this sense at all, because there's such a great repository of resources. And that's one of the reasons that I was able to dive into Unity so quickly. So, Marcelo, we can kind of take it back to you, and we can continue from there.
Thank you, Tiffany, so much. That was totally awesome. What did you guys think? Type in the chat what you guys thought, or just type in clap, clap, or whatever you like to say, so Tiffany knows that she's done a great job. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Remember also to ask questions. We have some questions already. Oh, I can see all the clap, clap, and thank you. I'm sure you're seeing that, Tiffany, too. So awesome job on that. And guys, remember, if you want to get 4 hours of Tiffany, and who doesn't, go to DELLiVRconference.com, register. She has a 4 hours. I'm right? It's 4 hour, not 3 hours.
It is 4 hours, yes.
4 hour session. She's going to cover a bunch more stuff. As you can see, she's got a great teaching style. She's very patient. So highly recommend you register and sign up for her session. It's going to be a really, really great session. So also a reminder to everybody, go ahead and type in questions in the Q&A there, and we're going to start answering them, as many as we can. And also, if you get a chance, go to HowToCreateVR.com and register for free weekly tutorials, podcasts, and all sorts of things. We even have live events in Altspace VR. So, all right, Tiffany, if you're ready, we'll start with, there was a couple of questions on what 3D software to use for making assets, and what's a good way to learn those skills?
Yeah, so scrolling all the way up, which tool is best for creating 3D models? And then the other one I think was like, what do I use?
Right.
So there's not really a best one. It's primarily preference. I use Autodesk products, so Maya and 3ds Max. I also am I love ZBrush, which is like organic sculpting. But really, if you're looking into getting into 3D modeling, one is there's a lot of great like VR sculpting tools. Like
I was going to ask you about, right? I was going to ask you about those.
And like as a technical artist, I don't use them because there's like much more granular ways to do things. But if you're not like a 3D modeler, you could totally make 3D models in that, export them, and import them into your Unity scene, which is awesome. But if you are looking to get into 3D modeling, Blender is a program that I hear everybody talk about. It's open source. It's, completely free. And that is what I see a lot of tutorials in, because it's free and it has a huge community.
Yeah, definitely. Very cool. It's another question here is, are you using any controller for hand interactions? Jonathan Rock also asked, which is similar to this question, I don't see the visualization for the hands in your inspector, no sprites or models, are they included in the Oculus scripts?
Yeah. So I am using the Oculus Touch controllers. The reason that you will only see, am I still screen sharing?
Yes, I'm
Okay,
leaving
cool,
it
cool.
to you so people you can show stuff. Yep.
Awesome. So you can see that when I select my hand right and left, there's only the sphere colliders, and that's the only representation. And that's because the Oculus hands are actually, it's a shader that's generated on start or on play of the Unity scene. So they're not just going to be like 3D models sitting in your scene. They're actually just shader components.
Very cool. Okay. And another question is, will we have more in-depth information on creating and using scripts at DELLiVR?
Yeah. So because there's a 4-hour time block, creating or doing some like basic interaction scripts to me seems like it's so totally doable, and it creates like a really customized experience fast. So if my hands are interacting with a radio, play sound, or if I'm, walk into this, or if I teleport into this doorway, open door. We will definitely be getting into like what I like to call glue scripts, which aren't like complete software architecture, but they can make your scene really interactive and customizable.
Cool. This one is, do you find Unity more user-friendly for non-programmers versus Unreal?
Oh, wow. Okay, so I actually taught a college course to a bunch of art students that only their expertise was Unreal. I would say 3 years ago, Unreal was primarily the artist game engine, and especially with its visual scripting. Now, Unity, especially when Unity came out in 2017, their primary focus is creating usability for artists. So I didn't get into any animation tools, any of the texturing, the lighting, the post-processing. Unity has come up for the last like 2 years, and they've been targeting artists. So I would say now it's very artist friendly.
So they're pretty equal, pretty much.
I would say so. Really, I mean, when people ask
Yeah.
Unreal or Unity, it's all opinion.
It really is all opinion.
Yeah,
You're right about that. Yeah. And they're both really good tools. Let's be
they
honest.
are.
They're great tools, and the way I see it, it ultimately depends on you, the creator, the designer, the developer, right? If you're good, you're going to put out something good. It's kind of like if you're a good photographer, you can shoot awesome photos with your iPhone or with a Canon 5D Mark III. I mean,
Exactly.
So excellent. And somebody, it's more of a comment/question. I'm guessing the Quest will work like this, and it's probably that question really connect not just for the Quest, but for any HMD, right?
Yeah. The Quest, yeah, so it also will have very similar controllers. I'm assuming very similar inputs. And yeah, I think that out of all of the Oculus products, it'll probably work the most similar to the Rift.
Right. Cool. How long did it take you to create a room like this?
This room, maybe under an hour. But that's because I had some of the assets, like the bed and stuff. Like I didn't create that. Those were assets that were provided in the Unity asset store. But then like I just started positioning things, paintings, lights, just decor. And then I did some extra texturing to like this rug.
Well, you did great with the lighting too, because the shadows. Yeah, that's pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, thanks. It's again, like once you get comfortable with Unity, you can build an environment really fast.
Right. Well, but if you think about it too, and I'm sure we have many filmmakers on this Zoom webinar here, but if you think about it, you're almost like a production designer here, right? I mean, in a set, because you're positioning lights. You're a cinematographer. You're a lighting person. I mean, that's what you got to do in VR now.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
Yeah, definitely. Let's see. Plugin questions plugins question. Are they part of the project? When you share it with someone, does the other person needs the plugin? I'm assuming they would need the plugin, just like if I share a Premiere Pro project and I'm using some sort of plugin, they would have to have that plugin as well.
Actually, so plugins, yes. But if you're talking about like software development kits, anything that's directly in the project exports and packages with the product. project. But if you do if you are using like a specific plugin, then they would have to have the plugin. So I'm not sure if they mean like the SDK or just actual plugins.
Oh, okay. So like the assets that you download, that's going to be part of the project, basically.
Everything in this project window, all of this is there. So like they do not have to download the Oculus SDK.
Got it. Got it. Okay, that makes sense. Let's see. How do you feel about Amazon Sumerian? I can answer that question. I think Sumerian is a great app. Keep in mind that this is native VR. Sumerian creates web VR. We're going to address that in the DELLiVR conference as well, the differences between web VR and native VR. Also, there's going to be actually a class, a session on Sumerian. Sumerian is a fantastic tool, but there is a difference between what Tiffany can do here with this tool, which is much higher end, and what Sumerian, and basically not just Sumerian, but all other web VR apps, what you can do today. But I personally believe the future of VR is web VR, just like the internet became the future of everything, right? With a web browser. Do you have any thoughts on that, Tiffany?
Yeah, kind of what you said. I haven't really dabbled in the Sumerian at all yet, but I know that it's much more user friendly, and you may not be able to do as much at a granular level. But I do also think that, you know, web VR is going to be how most people will access VR, and it's kind of like road to success. So I think it's a great tool.
Right, right. Yeah, definitely. Let's see. I don't know this. Not understanding what Alembic data is, .abc, but did you mention the importing and usage of Alembic data? Maybe you can do a quick, what is Alembic data?
Yeah, so I haven't, I did not go over that at all. So Alembic data is just another, it's another file type. And actually Unity, I believe a year ago, they initiated the Alembic importer plugin, and it was used in like a short film that Unity created, where like there were like millions of plastic balls that like form an ocean, and it's all done with Alembic data. And I believe that was generated in Houdini. So there is a plugin for that, and Unity can absolutely import that data.
Okay, cool. What about importing pictures? So photorealistic pictures instead of designing a room. So basically like a 360 photo.
Yeah. So that is a prime example of 360 video. You're just importing movies, movie files. And actually, since I'm
Or
still,
JPEG, right? They have to be in like a rectangular format, I would
yes.
imagine, right?
Yeah, so like this image here, this skybox, this is actually a picture.
Right.
Yeah, this is definitely a picture. And
Yeah.
you can also import pictures as so JPEGs, PNGs, there's a couple other file formats, as sprites, and then you can use them as like pictures on a wall.
I see, like
So
flat pictures, kind of like that poster on the bottom right.
yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
kind of
Just
like that. But one thing I do want to point out is if you zoom out so we can see the
yeah.
outside, with photos, with 360 photos in or videos, you're always floating because it's a sphere, right? It's mapped around the inside of the sphere,
Yep.
so you can't position things where it feels like it's on top of the floor or against the wall in a photo.
Yeah.
So it works here really well because it's basically the outside through the windows, and that's cool.
Yeah, there's some tricks to that, but it is more difficult to work with photos, especially if you're trying to make like an immersive experience because of the skewing and the resolution issues.
Right. And another thing we're going to address actually at DELLiVR Conference is volumetric video and photogrammetry. And that's where you can start using photos to create 3D objects, right? Or wrap 3D objects with photos and video. So yeah, okay, cool. So remember about deliverconference.com to register there and use the How to Create VR coupon code to save $50. All right, let's see. There was just a comment here from Jonathan that said, regarding importing the Oculus package, just a comment, sometimes installing a package from the Unity Asset Store can reset your layers. So it's a best practice to install all your packages before you start building. Do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, as with any package that you're importing, one day you could import it and it'd be fine, and the next time, due to like a different order, you can import it, it could package incorrectly, and then you'll have tons of errors. So it is best practice to import all of those heavy project or SDKs and external packages before you get like really in depth into your scene, because they are prone to error just because Unity's complex packing system.
Right, right. It's 9 o'clock, so on the Pacific time, and I know we're almost at the end, but there's a couple more questions I want to ask if people are okay with sticking around. Tiffany, do you have a couple more minutes to stick around?
Definitely.
Okay, cool. So if you're using Arnold and 3ds Max, should we plan on importing the lights or switch to Unity lights?
That's a good question. I would definitely like importing of lights can be kind of problematic in Unity, and Unity's lighting system is really complex. Pretty large learning curve, but when you do learn it, it can be utilized really beautifully, almost as beautifully as 3D packages. So if you're looking to do like real-time lighting, or I would say mostly just real-time lighting, I would say to do the lighting in Unity. But if you're doing baked lighting, then you could go ahead and just bake it in the 3D package, and then go ahead and import all of the assets.
I see. Cool. I just switched to my side here because we're almost at the end, but I do have a couple more questions. Mm-hmm. How long does it take for you to create an asset like a chair? I guess that would really depend on your experience on using the tool, right? I mean...
Yeah, so experience, and then like fidelity. So if I was just like creating that chair, it's really just like simple shapes and then really nice textures, and texturing is a great trick to like quickly do a 3D model. So maybe like for texturing and modeling, like an hour and a half.
But regarding fidelity, let's talk a little bit about the number of polygons and so is there some sort of best practices? Because obviously if you're doing it, let's say for the Oculus Go versus a desktop HMD, you obviously are not going to do so many polygons. So are there any best practices?
When bringing in individual assets, you want to stay under, I believe it's 66,000 tries. So everything in Unity is in try count, not poly count. And the reason is because if it's under or if it's over 66,000 tries, Unity will automatically like break up the model or the mesh somehow in its own practice, and then they'll actually be two different components, and they can be problematic if you're like using scripts to integrating with them. And then just overall, it's easy to translate something from the Oculus Go or what will be Quest to the Rift. But if you're going from Rift down to, let's say, Gear VR, you could crash the entire system, because the poly count for Gear VR would be like under 2,000, or I'm sorry, the try count would be like under 200,000 tries per scene. And it's much more forgiving in the Oculus Rift.
And I'm assuming there's tools within Unity that can preview some of this stuff before you publish, so you know if you're hitting the targets you want?
Yeah, so in the game view, Unity has a statistics bar where as you're looking in a direction in VR, it'll tell you how many tries you're looking at.
I see. Perfect. Last question. What is eye to neck distance?
Oh, interesting. I know that you can turn that on or off in the parameters of the, I believe, Ovr Camera Rig or somewhere in the Oculus SDK. And sometimes that the eye to neck distance causes like a skewing. So you can just simply turn that on and off to simulate what's more realistic. But eye to neck distance is exactly as it sounds. Like wherever the eyes are being represented, you can skew that neck distance to fit more like relative to real life. So I don't mess with it too much because I haven't had very many issues, but I know that's the general application for that.
Very cool. All right. Well, Tiffany, we're completely out of time. Thank you so much for the time you spent with us. Fantastic presentation. I look forward to actually meeting you in person at the DELLiVR Conference. I want to sit in your session because I want to learn more about Unity. I hope everybody else registers today at DELLiVRconference.com. And remember, use the HowToCreateVR to save $50 on your 3-day pass. And if you have any questions about the webinar, feel free to email me, marcelo@howtocreatevr.com. Also, if you want more weekly tutorials, podcasts, and all sorts of other VR-related content, sign up for free at howtocreatevr.com. If you have any questions about this conference, please feel free to email the event manager, which is Stephanie, and she will get back to you. Well, thank you so much, everybody, and thanks for sticking around a little bit longer. Tiffany, thank you so much again for your time. Really appreciate it. Everybody, one last time, we want to see you in LA at the DELLiVR Conference. Go to www.delivrconference.com and register. Use HowToCreateVR to register and get $50 off. And again, we will see you there. Thank you, everybody.